So this first session is one of the ones that Mary Margaret and I enjoyed. This is a bunch of fun. So this is all stolen, not all of it. With permission, we have this first personality comparison thing that we're going to do today. You'll see in just a moment. Mary Margaret and I years ago were at a marriage conference, and we weren't leading it. We were in the audience, and the guy's name was. Doesn't matter what his name was.
So we can't even give him credit.
Right. But we had been married for a long time, and there were these things that we just heard each other around all the time. And we're going to talk about some of them this morning. And we're sitting here listening to this guy, and like, I don't know if we actually did this, but in our minds we were going, that's it. Like, that's me and you. That's why we do the things we do. And my guess is, I'm just guessing, that you married somebody that might be very unlike you in some ways. I don't know that. It could be that you married your twin, and that would be weird. A crucible, this is a helpful definition. So, a crucible is where you put things to change them. And what I want you to see is that by a beautiful design, God has partnered you with somebody that's probably very different than you. He's given you children that are He's going to use your children to mold you while you mold them. Like, this is all God's, a very beautiful, complex, only God could do it kind of thing. Whereby at the end of your life, sanctification will be accomplished in ways that you didn't imagine, including the trials that you're going to experience in marriage and with your children. So what we're going to do today is the first part of this session might feel a little bit academic in that there's not a lot of scripture. So, but this is, I really want, hold on, can't stand it. I just want this to go away. The first part of this is, how should we even view personality traits? So here's the wrong question, right? Here's the wrong question. Are my personality traits good or bad? So personality traits in and of themselves are just neutral things. Like, we're all very, very different. The better question is, are the ways that I tend to be, like these personality traits, my personality defaults, are they redeemed or are they not redeemed? Like, have I submitted them to the Lord? So when I became a Christian at age 20, my personality did not change. But how those personality traits manifested themselves to others had to change. But God didn't change. He changed me, to be sure, but I'm saying He didn't make me a new person with regard to my desire to socialize. Like, I'm a people person. Like, He didn't change those things about me. And it's also very possible that the personality traits that are most hurtful to your spouse and children sometimes are the very same traits that are beneficial and attractive at times. So my wife, like, one of the things, she thinks I'm funny. And she likes that. She likes funny people. And sometimes I use that humor terribly ineffectively. Perhaps in a time when I use it to be hurtful. And that's, the fact that I'm funny is not good or bad. The fact that I enjoy being funny isn't good or bad. It's do I submit that to the Lord and use it to honor Him? Or do I use it to dishonor Him? So think about your spouse. What is it that you were attracted to? Was it whether they presented in a room? Was it their ability to solve problems? That they were funny? That they were confident? Whatever it is. Well, I'll bet you that if you think back through times that you have found yourself being hurt by them, there were times when these very same things were at play. Their ability to be confident. Maybe they domineer a disagreement. Maybe they're too strong in a disagreement. Maybe you might be mismatched with a partner intellectually, and like, that's not, like, one of you is more intelligent than the other. And it may be that they can, in conversation, use words to confuse you. Like this happens. So, all of these things, any traits you can think of that's not sin in and of itself, right? All can be useful and beneficial, but they can be harmful as well. Great intellect can be of great benefit. Great intellect can be used to harm. Great humor, great courage, great whatever. The question to ask is, am I using my personality to bless and encourage and bring help to my family? So whatever it is, however it is that God made you, and praise God He made you just like that, are all of those being submitted to the Lord so that as a father, as a wife, as a mother, as a father, you're letting God take the way you've been made in His image and minister to your family. So we're going to go through some of these. Have fun. Here we go. I bet that one of you is a thinker and one of you is a feeler. All right, so thinker, feeler. Totally. So thinkers tend to be more logical and analytical and linear. We'll talk a little bit more about this in just a second. Feelers tend to be more affective, creative, and circular. Problem solver, let's talk about it, right? Problem solver, let's talk about it. So here's what I mean by that. So if Mary Margaret, if there was something that we needed to work on in our home, and it could be a loose cabinet, like door. I mean, I'm not. This doesn't have to be a wayward child, right? Mary Margaret, this is what it would look like, and this is beautiful. My wife could run any Fortune 5 company in the world. Like, she could do anything. I could not. And so this is what it would look like. All right, Tim, we've got a loose cabinet door. The strategy is to assemble the tools, and by it's 9:37. I'd like to be done with this by 10 o'clock. Let's get a team together and get it done. I love you. But cabinet door would get fixed. I would be miserable the whole time because we didn't get to do it the way I wanted. So here's how I would fix the cabinet door, okay? Here's how I would fix the cabinet door. Hey. Man, that cabinet door has been loose for so long. How does that make you feel? Tell me. And then instead of like putting a plan together and be like, let's ask the kids what we think. Like, let's get them. Like, what could we do? How do you do this? And how can we all at the end of the time? Can we just have had a good time doing this? Like this, that would be the right way to. And so these differences have caused real problems in our marriage. She is so useful, so able, so capable of making things better in our home, and she does it in a linear fashion. But sometimes that linear thinking can be hurtful to me, because if it's something that I have an affection for, like, it's not that she doesn't have affection, it's just not, she doesn't feel like she needs to communicate that to me. So move past the cabinet door and take something like, where are we going on vacation? I would arrive, like if you go to Disney World with this woman, it is so planned.
It has to be.
Does it? All right.
If you go to Disney World with this man, you may not leave the hotel. There, the pool's there, the kids can play.
Oh, yeah. Okay. No, I didn't say anything. All right. Next one.
All right, social interaction. So typically in a marriage, you'll have an introvert and an extrovert. And in children, if you have more than one child, you're probably going to see these things appear in your children as well. So in our home, there are definitely 3 extroverts. And when I tell you that they are constantly saying, who can we have over? Where can we go eat with somebody? Tim would invite people over Sunday at church, never having mentioned to me that we would have company. There was no food at the house. Like, I could have offered peanut butter and jelly. But, I mean, like, that's, again, kind of like the thinker and the feeler. The feeling is, I want to be around people, but the thinking didn't happen on, what are we going to eat? It didn't matter. Like, let's just have people over. We'll just sit around and look at them and drink coffee. All right, so extroverts love many relationships. There just can't be too many relationships in their life. Introverts love few relationships, and it's not that introverts don't want people in their lives, but they kind of have a limit. Like, they know when they're going to be spent too much with too many people.
Like one? I'm sorry.
It might be one. I mean, the truth is, extroverts are energized by crowds, parties, social interactions. They're your social butterflies. And then introverts are energized by solitude and quietness.
Who-
We've got a friend that like says, like, how do you refuel? Do you refuel when you're at home alone? Or do you refuel when you're in a public setting with a bunch of people? Or a dinner party? Like, do you refuel by people, interaction, or in solitude?
Who are the introverts? Extroverts? Did any of, I'm just out of curiosity, is there a couple in the room where 2 extroverts married or 2 introverts married?
I have a hard time with quiet.
Really? Both of you
Yeah.
are what?
Introvert.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we know some other couples like that.
Both introverted.
Yeah. 2 extroverts would make it would be a disaster.
I mean, absolute disaster.
Actually, we used to laugh, some of our very best friends, she was the extrovert and he was the introvert, so the opposite of us. And we used to laugh that if God had aligned us differently, if I had married the introvert, Jason,
Oh, yeah.
and he had married the extrovert, they would have a bunch of fun and be broke. And we would be like nobodies, but have a great accumulation of wealth. But God knows best.
God knows best, for sure.
Can you be both? You ever heard anybody that do both?
Well, now here's the deal. So a lot of times these
I've heard it
words,
said like you're a closeted introvert, or you're a closeted extrovert.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Trinity
That's
Davis,
what I'm
same
saying. I
thing.
think, I know somebody, I don't know who that is, but I think the closet extrovert actually, you know.
Sometimes I also, I don't even sometimes, I totally think that we can grow to be more healthy. So there would have been a time when I would not have liked large gatherings of people, and even having people in the home would have been intimidating. But with his extrovert personality, I would say that I've grown to enjoy it more. It's still not my nature, but I've learned to like it more.
and also I have to be careful to remind myself that this, you measure whether or not you're an introvert or an extrovert, not based on your ability to communicate into some, like, it's not that you're unable to talk and use words and those kind of things. You can be very introverted. Jonathan would be an example of somebody who perhaps is in fact an introvert, but he's a very capable communicator. Trinity Davis, a friend of ours, same thing. He's very introverted. That is to say, he refuels in solitude. Like he's my best friend, and if he needs to refuel, he doesn't want to be around. He wants to be by himself. But if you move him into this setting, all of you would say, "Man, he's fantastic. Like so comfortable. Like, but he's an introvert." So it's not do you talk when you're around people? It's in your mind. Or do you find the resource? Do you find a greater resource in the presence of people or in the absence of people? That's what extrovert really means. Next one.
All right, understanding.
It's a great one.
Objective versus subjective. Future versus present. So objective people tend to see time in terms of numbers.
How dumb is that? How dumb is that? Like,
I agree.
So if the objective person would probably be likely to say supper's going to be at 6 tonight, and they mean 6 o'clock.
who says that?
Not
The
6:01.
subjective person might say, I'll be home at 2 or 3 at the latest, and at 4:30 you look on your little app and you're an hour away.
And show up with 12 people.
Time is in terms of approximation. So if they give you a time in this 24-hour period, they really mean just this 24-hour period. I mean, sometime today I'm coming home. Future-oriented people tend to plan and focus on what is coming. So they're calendar-driven. They're going to know when appointments are, what's going to happen next month, when are we going to take a vacation. They like the plan, and present-oriented people, did I skip one?
Nope.
Okay, present-oriented people tend to enjoy and live in the moment. They are all about what's happening right now. They're the ones that at church say, come on over and have lunch, in the moment. So this is something that, like in our home, I have found that oftentimes our disputes about time are actually when we act opposite of what is our nature. So if he, who is subject to time, all of a sudden decides it's really important to get somewhere on time, it throws me for a loop. Like if I have not thought it is of value to get to this particular place on time, we can have some personality strife in that moment. Or the opposite of that, if all of a sudden I'm laid back about something when I'm normally structured about something on time. I thought we were doing this right now. I thought we were doing this at this time. I thought you told me that. So it's kind of funny. It's not usually our events that cause the problem. It's when we act opposite of our events is what I've seen in our thing.
So who are the who are the people in the room that are like, this is what's coming? And who are the people in the room that are like, I'm having fun right now, I don't need to do anything else? Right. Yeah, so let me just say this about my wife. I think this is a real mistake to listen to two people or think about your marriage and think that there's a fun person and a not fun person. That's a mistake. Because my wife is a blast. Again, let me go back to the very beginning. We're not talking about things that are of merit or demerit. We're talking about things that are neutral. And am I willing to take my subjective view of time, and as weird as it seems, make sure that I'm using it with her in mind to benefit her? Make sure that I'm not sinning in those areas, making sure that I'm keeping my word to her, those kind of things. So as we go through lots of these, if you're extroverted and like just I'm living in the moment, that doesn't make me more fun. You know what probably makes me? Immature if I don't rein that in. So resist the idea of pigeonholing your spouse or yourself as being the fun one or the.
But I also think you don't have to yield to that tendency either. All right? I mean, just like with me, Kim says I'm a 15 on a scale of 10, right? All the time. 7 days a week.
Meaning like.
Just go do it, right?
Yeah,
And so.
I don't understand you.
15 every day. All right? But that don't mean that I have to stay at 15 either. I mean, I can work on that. All right? And then sometimes I feel like she's a 5. Like she's just like, whatever.
Hey, right here.
We're good. And that doesn't mean she has to stay a 5 either.
Yeah.
We've just got to work to where we got common ground on things, you know, and I think just like the introvert and extrovert part, just because we have that tendency does not mean we should yield to those tendencies either if it's a contention between our spouse. That also doesn't mean I should expect her to become an extrovert either. I'm just saying just because she's an introvert and I'm an extrovert, all of a sudden I shouldn't go meet her at introversion, right? And I'm not asking her to meet me at extroversion. I'm saying that we can both work.
Christian psychologists would say she couldn't do it.
Well,
It would be impossible for her to do it,
Right.
or for you to
Right.
become
To
it.
change,
right, and
not to
you can't
meet.
change it, but you can put the effort in to make that other spouse go and do things with it. Or I can go and sit on, yeah, or I can go sit,
Right.
or I can go sit on the couch, and I'm just sitting there like, about to have a heart attack. But I need to learn to be okay with that.
You do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Next one.
Okay, I gotta go back and tell one little story about the social interaction thing. Tim is such an extrovert that when we were like newlyweds and would go out on dates, I would say to him before we walked into the restaurant, just make sure you talk to me more than you talk to the waiter. Like, 'cause he wanted to know that, like, he would like, at the end of the day, like at the end of the evening, like, would be, yeah, have a seat, tell us your life story.
I mean, it's weak.
All right, so we are at organization, orderly versus disorderly. And this one's, so far, all of them, this is the one that I thought, this is the easiest right now when you've got children in the home to think, okay, my child is this or this. You certainly see their extrovert or introvert, objective or subjective time stuff, but this one you see pretty early on. Orderly individuals tend to like neatness for things to be in their place and things have a place if you're an orderly individual. Disorderly individuals aren't bothered by disorganization, and in fact they may even have their own organization. So when I can walk into my youngest room And my oldest, you know, the oldest is supposed to be real structured, she was not. Like the room, like covered in clothing and art supplies and stuff and school books. But what I did learn is I could say, where is immediately me? Like their chaos is their organization. Now, there is the kid that's just totally unorganized and can't find it. I'm not saying that that kid doesn't exist either, or that adult doesn't exist. All right, orderly people view their environments as needing control. Tim, if my home is too disorderly, I feel disorderly inside. Like I have to get the kitchen clean. And that is like, you know, if I go out of town and he cleans my kitchen, he gets back to my life. Disorderly people view their environment functionally. So if all of their school supplies are spread out all over the counter or their bedroom, you know, whether it's on their bed or on their floor or whatever, that's their, they know how that works. That's their way of functioning. I saw a meme the other day, and it was like, sometimes I like to hide my kids' stuff just to make them look, just to see that they can't find it. So I put their shoes in the closet, I put their keys in the key basket, put everything where it belongs, and then their people can find it. But it's so true for the disorderly person, the orderly person.
So who are the orderly people in the room? And the disorderly?
You be both.
Can you be both?
I think there is a fine line though, like, because on some things, like, I don't have to have them so organized. But other things, I need them in order, or like you said, I feel like I'm not in order, like I can't function.
I'm not being funny, it can be a real source of anxiety if Mary Margaret feels like our home is disheveled.
Mine's the kitchen, and yet my truck can look like a garbage dump, right? But the kitchen is just an OCD for me, I don't know why, so I mean, I think you're right.
And you can be some of both. Like, everybody's got a junk drawer. I don't care how orderly you are. There's a junk drawer in your home.
All right, so the next one is the consideration of adaptability. So we're going to talk about highly adaptive people versus lowly adaptive people. You know, it's, again, when we use these descriptive words like high or low or like disorganized, like the tendency is for us to think, well, there's a good and a bad here. There's not a good and a bad here. There's not a good, it's not wrong in and of itself to be disorderly or orderly, or to be low adaptability in this case. So the question really we're asking is, within this category is, how comfortable are you with change? Are you open to change, or are you averse to change? So here's what it looks like. Highly adaptable people are not only comfortable with change, they seek out change. They tend to view change as beneficial. I am very adaptable, which means that I want to move all the time. I want to go like...
He means like move homes. Like every time we go on vacation, he looks at the real estate. He's like,
We've looked like in Big Sky. Tomorrow, I'll move.
He called a real estate agent.
I'm already looking.
But on the other hand, less adaptable people are not less important or less skilled or less moral or whatever. They tend to avoid change and typically experience anxiety during times of change. So in our marriage, let me tell you how this looks in our marriage. It's a great benefit to us in keeping schedules, in the way that we order the, you know, like your home, and as you get older and your family grows, it perhaps will get more complex. But our home can, because of her low adaptability, run like a sewing machine. We have, you know, at one time we had 5 children at home, and there's a lot of stuff, and if I change something, oh, by the way, yeah, I didn't take care of the piano, we ended up going to Sonic. So, like, my immaturity in being highly adaptable sometimes would cause real problems. So, low adaptability people, if that's your thing, if that's how God made you, praise God you exist. Because you're going to be the person in the home very often that makes it predictable. And we need predictable things in our lives. Now, on the other hand, we don't need monotony, and there are times when my high adaptability is a blessing to my family, because I'll just come in and go, you know what? We're going to do this. we're just gonna go do this, and we're gonna, and they need that, we all need that sometimes. But please resist the temptation to think, yeah, I'm highly adaptable, she's low adaptability. No, praise God, she's low, she doesn't have a great deal of adaptability, and I can know where my children are most of the time.
Yeah, I think in that you really do have to come together. The healthiest families have some flexibility. Like you have to be able to roll with circumstances that weren't planned, and just surprises and stuff are fun too. Like it's a good balance when you can find the balance.
Here's one that my wife and I, this has actually caused some real strife in our marriage. We've hurt each other. I've hurt her for sure. Are you an active person or a passive person? So this is going to be what you were just talking about. It's not better to be active. It's not better to be passive. This is just the way God made you, perhaps. We're not talking about just physical activity. We're talking about mental activity. Do you like to have a busy mind, or do you like to have a calm mind? And mature adults have to be able to have both. You have to have both. But my default is to be a passive-minded person or a passive person. My wife's default is to be an active-minded person. So my wife in her high activity tend to need movement and high levels of stimulation. So what that means is she's working on something. She's accomplishing something. There's something to be done. My wife can tend to feel lazy if she's not working hard at something. On the other hand, people like myself tend to think, I want to just relax, like we don't need to change anything, let's just do nothing, okay? Let's just live and just enjoy this the way it is. Now here's what, in our vacations are funny for Mary Margaret and I. This will likely influence what type of quality time your spouse enjoys. So picture this, if you will. Let's say that my wife and I I'm making this up. Let's say my wife and I got away on a mountain vacation. Kids, take care of yourself. We're going to Big Sky for the summer. And that'd be a big vacation. Yeah. So the first night we fly in, we get to the airport, we get moved into our beautiful chalet. This is all hypothetical. And we have a wonderfully romantic time, and we go to bed, and we wake up the next morning, just looking at each other. Laying in the bed looking at each other. And I would reach over and I would put my hand on my wife's face and I would say, I could do this all day long. And my wife would say, I have planned a 40-mile hike. My wife, when we go on vacation, she doesn't want
to vacation from your vacation.
So she's prone to want to do things. We're on vacation, let's do stuff. Now, it's not that she wants to do fun stuff. She doesn't want to do her calendar, but she might want to read a book. I don't want to read a book. I just want to sit there. I want to just not have to work. That's what a vacation is. And so I bet, who are the active people in the room? You want to be busy. Who are the inactive people or the passive folks? You're satisfied just to rest, right? You can easily, we don't need to take any time. You already know probably where sin can creep in both of these personality types. All right, Mary Margaret.
This is independent versus dependent. And when Tim and I first heard this one taught at the marriage conference that we were attending, this was a big aha moment for us. We'd never heard these two traits being compared. And independence in this particular trait, it's not the same meaning as brave. I would say we have a daughter that I would call brave. She's willing to go to another country that she's never been to all by herself. I would never do that. But I am the independent. So we'll read about these. All right, high independence people tend to want, so sometimes they want less emotional attachment to others, and sometimes we need less emotional attachment to others. Dependent people tend to flourish when emotional attachments are strong and intimate. All right, then. All right, independent people show autonomy. We require less care. We function very well with just what we've got to do that day. Dependent people seek affirmation and input from others. So I tend to think a good way to figure out which one you are is if you are separated. Like if one spouse is out of town, which spouse is the one that's texting or calling and needing some connection from the other spouse? And which spouse is the one that's like, I'll be back in 2 days, I love you. And that, I mean, I think of myself as dependent, like I feel like I need him, but there are times when it's not the emotional need that I'm thinking of, it's more the, I need him to mow the lawn. But again, these are not, it's so easy to think that one of these is a bad and one of these is a good, and they're not. It's just the way we tend to feel emotional connections.
So with your children, you can recognize this pretty quickly. You're going to have children that want very much they want to be cared for. And it's not that sometimes it's not even that they're incapable of caring for themselves. What they're longing for is to be connected to you. They're a dependent, God has made them dependent, and that's going to be a great benefit to them because they're going to be probably more willing to create emotional bonds with people. These are the folks that you feel close to quickly because they're willing to grasp on and let you know about themselves and those kind of things. They're desiring, like, I need you to accept me for who I am. Whereas that can become a real problem. And independent people like my wife, they are able, even in times of stress or pain, to still accomplish things. They don't need affirmation. They can just press through even when things are less than ideal, whereas I might just be coming apart at the seams because, somebody doesn't like me, or, those type of things.
You want to ask this one?
Yeah, who are the dependent people in the room? I am super needy. Like when my wife goes out of town, it's a train wreck. Like, oh my God.
Don't be half
And who are the independents? Like, it's okay if, like, I'll be back in 48 hours. It's gonna be fine. Okay.
You know what's amazing to me is a lot of extroverts that you would think would not be are the absolute most dependent people in the world.
Me.
And that's the way I am. I mean, like, outside the world, you'd never know any like people half the time. And then I get home and I'm like, I bump into my wife and she stops. So, crazy.
All right, impulsivity, controlled versus impulsive. This is another one that's usually pretty easy to see in our children and in our spouses. Controlled people tend to be thoughtful and deliberate in their actions. So a controlled person is almost always thinking. We are thinking about what's coming next. We are thinking about what we're about to say. We're thinking about what we're going to do. And we're thinking, why are we going to say this? Or why are we going to do this? Or why are we not going to say this or do this? Impulsive people tend to invest less thinking into their actions, and that would be true of words too. They are in the moment and they do. There's not a lot of thinking as they carry on in this world. Control people.
Not that you have an opinion.
I have to tell the story. Some of our dearest friends, they have a daughter who is now 17 or 18, but when she was little. And impulsivity, like impulsive children certainly can grow out of some of their impulsivity, but she put red paint all over her hands, went across the street to the neighbor's house, did red handprints all up the sidewalk that led to their front door, on their front door, back down the sidewalk, came home and washed her hands. They get a phone call later. And my friend was like, it was like a murder scene. My child had gone across the street and created a murder scene. No explanation as to why, she just thought it would be fun. Impulsive people make really funny stories, I will say that. Controlled people can become paralyzed by their need to analyze before acting. So sometimes the thinking through, it can't lead to the behavior because you've got to come up with the right thought to get to the behavior. Impulsive people can be burdened by regret over their decisions after the fact. So a lot of times the thought comes after the comment has been made. Are you pregnant? No, I had a baby 6 months ago. So I was just thinking, like, in your lives, like what you've seen, what are examples when these are good? Like, where is impulsive good?
It can be fun.
Yeah.
Man,
Choosing a restaurant.
Fire.
restaurant, yes, Brett.
Fire. I think you're right. I mean, it can be it'd be great, you know? It can be great.
Sometimes my impulsivity makes Mary Margaret and I able to like inject ourselves into a difficult situation because I might be without, and like God's good in this, like without completely thinking, like I wouldn't have said that if I thought about it, but it worked out fine. Like saying, like asking a question that may be much more personal than maybe it would have been had like Mary Margaret wouldn't have asked the question. But you're wise enough to see that can become very hurtful too. Like, I have offended people like, it's none of your business, like, I don't like you anymore.
remember what you asked Betsy when you first met her?
I
Remember the
know,
first thing you said to me?
I have no idea.
We did.
You got in between me and Jonathan. We've been dating for at least 2 years. And you said, have y'all kissed before? And I did not make you from Adam.
So that's probably immature. I mean,
You was hoping it was good.
We loved her for it.
But this is, again, like y'all are wise enough to figure out that impulsivity, when it's controlled, can be a great benefit, but sometimes, like my wife, when we were picking a white paint color for the house,
I was just thinking that. Our house would still not be finished if he'd not been a little bit impulsive. He finally said, I think you're sinning. You've got to pick a white. There is not one white. There are 100 billion shades of white. But I needed the right one. And I'm very happy with the one that we have.
and had I built our house, we would have horrible paint colors.
We might look like a hospital.
All right, who are the control people in the room? Who are the impulsive people in the room? One's not better than the other.
I'm different in different systems.
Oh, I'm telling you, like an A and B person.
At work, I'm one, and at home, I'm another.
Is that because you need to be? Is that because the context that you put yourself in requires you to be one or the other?
That's actually a thing in psychology. Like, they'll differentiate between somebody that you have to be in your professional life and somebody that you are relaxed.
One of the
Right, so
pastors
home
are-
is what you like, nature, yeah.
there's a pastor at our church that is just like, his name is Brad Hodges. Like the guy he is so direct. Like the guy is unthinkably forceful when he talks to you. We teach a young married Sunday school class, and I'll be in his office and I'll give an idea, and he's like, "That's a terrible idea. It's a terrible idea."
He's not that harsh.
He's that harsh. He's that harsh.
I've not said no.
He's a fantastic. I'm not joking, y'all. He's a tremendous guy. But God has just made him such that, and he's ended some bad ideas because he was willing to say. So this is the same guy that when there's an elephant in the room, well, there's not an elephant in the room anymore because Brad just said, "Hey, why aren't we talking about this? This is the problem, right?" So this is he is impulsive in the sense that he does not overanalyze what he's going to say. He can also be very hurtful to me. Like I'm a feely, like hug me, Brad. Like what are you doing? So, all right, next one.
Distractibility. All right, are we focused or are we easily distracted?
It does not say easily distracted.
Okay, are we distracted? Focused people find it important to stay on task, and they're usually good at staying on task. Distracted people desire movement between tasks. And this it doesn't necessarily mean like they start a task and then they've got to go do physical movement. It might be that they quit the task to move on to another task, and that task never comes back they never go back to that task to be completed. Focused people tend to have better memories, and they follow through. And distracted people tend to be more forgetful and comfortable with leaving tasks incomplete. So, like if I was reading that and had no context, I would easily think, well, we should all want to be focused. But the distracted person, again, there's the flexibility. The distracted person can say, okay, this task is no longer important. And in life, there are lots of times when you abandon something because it's not of value. You realize there's something else that's better. So the distracted people have beneficial things in our marriages and in our relationships, and even our relationships with our children as well.
What can be the negative of being hyper-focused?
Not seeing other needs around you.
And Mary Margaret, sorry, and so what can be the dangers, the scenarios that creep in for people like me who are distracted easily?
Nothing gets done. Nothing gets done, even in your marriage.
I'm comfortable not solving that. Yeah, and it can be a real problem for me. All right, who are the focused people in the room? Who in the room is easily distracted?
This one, I really also think it depends on, like, what are we talking about? So, like, if it's something that you enjoy, you're going to be focused. So, he would be, by nature, the distracted one. But if it's reloading guns, could do it for hours. Or reloading bullets, could do it for hours, because he enjoys doing that.
How did you choose that?
Because it's tedious, it seems, and you don't usually like tedious projects.
The one I think about in my work is there's nothing to this designation. I'm called a stratified manager, which means that I can
Burn stuff?
anybody can burn stuff in Mississippi. So. But unlike my personality, when I write burn management plans and when I burn, I am like I get teased. Like I am super careful. But that's not my person. I'm very careless otherwise. So I think that when I think maturity is when context requires the distracted person to be focused, I have to be focused. But my default, I'm telling you, my default is, we can quit this and do something else. That's fine. I don't care. All right, last one.
All right, and approachability. Approachability versus withdrawal. Approachable people welcome new people into their world, and I would say easily. So even withdrawn people will welcome people, but we have a harder time doing so. People low in approachability tend to withdraw from from new people in new situations. It takes us more time to warm up to others and new situations or uncomfortable situations. High approachability people tend to warm up to people quickly. They're the one that the waiter becomes the best friend. An hour later, got this new friend, or they meet somebody at work and they want to have them over for dinner, and the wife too that they've never met. Withdrawn people tend to be more analytical of new people, taking longer to establish deep connections. And so on this one, like when I read it, I'm like, why wouldn't everybody want to be the approachable person? Like that sounds like the fun one and the kind one and the hospitable one. So withdrawn might not be the perfect word. We did still listen to somebody else, but I do tend to think that withdrawn people, a lot of times it's easier to have more discernment because there's a little more boundary protection there before we just warm up to whatever we're going into, whether that is a situation or meeting new people. And again, they both have, they truly both have benefits in our spouses and in our children.
The joke's been made a lot of times in our home, like I could go to a logging site and meet somebody I really like, and Mary Margaret's living we're going on vacation with them. Is that okay?
Tim started online dating way before it was cool. He was on Mississippi Department of Wildlife and Fisheries, right?
Yeah, the forum.
There was like a forum, and he meets a guy that
Paul
wants
Hopper.
to go fishing.
Uh-huh.
Has he ever met Paul Hopper?
Uh-uh.
No. Is he going to meet Paul Hopper to go fishing somewhere out in the rural country world? Yes. And I'm like, you're going to be at the bottom of the lake. I'm going to be widowed with 5 small children.
Was the
now,
fishing good?
It was good.
and me and Paul Hopper still do business together today.
Great.
All right, so let's think about this. So I hope you've been thinking about your children, you've been thinking about your spouse, I really hope you've been thinking about yourself, where are weaknesses that crop up because these aren't redeemed perhaps in your life from time to time. So the sources of conflict, so with the backdrop of everything we just talked about, I want you to think about what creates conflict in your family. And I'm going to go ahead and steal my own thunder. We're not going to get to sin until way down the list, okay? But these are sources of conflict. One source of conflict is there was an accident. Now, you give me a good working definition of what is an accident.
Something not intended to happen.
Nobody intended for this to happen, but it happened, okay? Conflict ensues. Why did this happen? How did this happen? This caused damage, whatever. But if we back all the way up to the start of things, it was an accident. This is true of little kids. This is true of old men. Accidents happen. And so when there's conflict and it's born out of an accident, there needs to be a way that we approach that conflict. Miscommunication and misunderstanding. Let's think about children. Are you a good communicator to your child? That is, do you tell your 4-year-old everything they need to know to understand what is expected of them? Or are you prone, like I have been at times to do, to just basically think, I made myself clear. They ought to be able to figure out all the ripples that what I meant. So I told you not to go in the backyard. I told you not to go in the backyard. But I didn't make it clear like you can't go on the deck. But Dad, you didn't say don't go on the deck. No, I said don't go in the backyard. That's everything from the door back. And the kid just didn't understand what I was saying. But that was my fault, because I said don't go out. I should have said don't go out the back door. So nobody sinned, but there was a miscommunication or a misunderstanding. All right, here's one, and they get a little more intense as we go. Very easy with our children to think, and with our spouses, conflict that arises because we have a difference in opinion. This is what I think we should do versus what I think, rather what you think we should do, when we should do it, how we should do it, etc., etc., etc. No sin is involved, but we just disagree about what should happen and how it should happen. Weaknesses. You have weaknesses. That is to say that they're not sin in and of themselves, you're just not good at it. There are things that I'm just not good at, and I want to do better at them. They aren't sins, but they're hurtful nonetheless, because if I could do them better, my wife would feel more loved. And sometimes that causes conflict. Unmet needs. Oh my goodness, with your children. I think one generation in front of us, these are stereotypes, and I'm recognizing that as I'm saying it. In certain cultures, in certain periods of time, I hear it said like this so often, like, if I'd have done that, my daddy would take it off his belt and whoop me. And if you really drill down, like those dads weren't friends. They may have been good disciplinarians in moments, but that child, like your kids need more than discipline. You are meeting a need, but you're not meeting all their needs if you only discipline your children. And in my father's family in particular, this led to huge conflict within the family, because this grandfather of mine, who really felt like he was being a man, and really, I'm not making fun, he really believed he was doing what men did. He worked hard, and he drove a hard bargain at home. I said it, you're going to do it, these are the rules, you broke the rules, here comes punishment. But he didn't meet a bunch of needs. And the conflict in the family was huge. Well, finally, we're to sin. Conflict occurs because you sin against your kids, because you sin against your spouse. That is to say that you lie to them, deceive them, disobey them, refuse to submit, refuse to love. All these, that like God has said it's good to do this, you do something different. But as we move forward, here's where we're going to land the plane. When it comes to parenting, there's a special type of sin that all of your children are capable of, and it's called defiance. And here's what defiance is. I know what I'm supposed to do, and I've thought about it, and I'm not going to do it. Now listen to me. Go right back to last night, please. Guys, when you're sitting in front of the computer and you know it is a sin for you to look at pornography, and you weigh everything out and you do it anyway, it's defiance. Ladies, when you know, and I'm using stereotypes. It could be the woman that has that problem. It could be the guy that's prone to gossip. And the Lord's convicted you about it, and you're sitting there and you know something that you could get a response from this person, or they would think it was interesting, or you're eager to tell it, and you think, I'm just going to tell them anyway. It's defiance. When your kid hears a command, an instruction, and they don't do it and they're defiant, it's just as dangerous as the man or the woman sitting in front of the computer who says, I know I shouldn't do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. So don't imagine that the defiant kid is that much different than you, because they're really not. They're just really not. But I wish that all of us long for the Lord to discipline us in a way that would end. Let me just say it personally. When I'm sane, I wish that God would use some type of discipline in my life to just rid me of defiance. And that's what, and sometimes that's what we need to do with our children. We're complicated folks, aren't we? Like the Proverbs are filled with these maxims about this. In the ESV it reads like this: the purpose of a man's heart is like deep water. That is to say, you can't see to the bottom. Like it takes exploration to figure my heart out. And a person with understanding will draw it out. My wife is a very understanding wife. And I'm telling you, she knows me so well. Like we could go to a counseling appointment and I could say something and I'm so manipulative and so prone to use good words and be influential or charming or whatever it is, my salesman personality. And we can get in the truck to go home and my wife knows what my heart was doing. Like she knows me that well. And God has used it now for a quarter of a century to sanctify me. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable to your sight. As we're thinking about these, like what are the meditations of your heart? Like what are the things, in the quietness of your heart, are the things that nobody knows that you worship, that you value, are they accepting to do it? And in your home, like there was a time Mary Margaret and I really got real serious on authority at one point. My children were really well behaved. And I took great pride in it, but I wasn't self-aware enough to know what was happening. And I ended up at Pyro's Pizza with a 19-year-old daughter telling me how much it hurt her when I acted that way. But it's because I wasn't, the meditations in my heart weren't acceptable in those times. So in the last session, we'll talk a little bit more fully about this. So here's what it looks like. Here's what it looks like. Be humble and be self-aware. So this verse, this Matthew 7, this is the verse that you're probably familiar with. This is the whole judge not lest you be judged, plank in your eye. Get the beam out of your eye, depending on what translation. Before you take the speck out of your, like parents, come on now. Your kids are really sharp. They really, really are. And when you fuss at them about things that they see in your life, it is so discouraging to them. When you ask more of them, or at least when you refuse to admit that you struggle with it too, like we talked about last night, when you act like, hey, if you don't do this, I'm going to be displeased with you, and then they watch you not do it, that is so, so cruel to a child. It's cruel to a spouse. So please, if you want peace in your home, if you're thinking about a situation or how you're having conflict, would you please just start by having some self-examination and ask yourself, am I more concerned with my family conforming to my wants and my desires and my needs, or being conformed to the Holy Spirit? So I'm telling y'all, I may be sitting up here teaching, but this is a gold mine of garbage. Like I can dig this out of my life in lots of places. Be very careful with words. Last night, my wife reminded me of something hurtful that I said to her years ago. And I had forgotten I'd even said it. These two verses the verse from James especially is one of my one that I recall in mind. This is the one, and actually in verse 5 it says, how great a forest is set ablaze by a fire. And in the next verse, which is James 3:6, says, the tongue is a fire. Like listen, forgiveness is great, right? There's nothing, nobody's ever done anything in this room that can't be forgiven. But oh my goodness, the way that words linger. So when you're speaking to your children, your position of authority, your position of power, your position of influence, your position of all those things we talked about that are meant to be blessings. When you use words or even actions that aren't careful, you don't recognize it. Like it'd be like if I shook a baby's hand the way I shake a man's hand, it would be hurtful to the child. And so it is with my words. The way I speak to somebody in the woods has to be different than the way I speak to my dog. I'm not mean to people in the woods, that sounds like I was. And then finally, am I seeking the truest source of hurt and willing to do what's needed to be reconciled? You know, one of the for your kids, I mean, you're gonna think this is all we talked about, I'm afraid. For your kids, when they're hurting, when they know there's conflict between the two of you, and I'm telling you, it's magic. And don't be insincere, be sincere. But when it's your fault and you go to them and you're going to physically get on their level, you're going to get them in your lap, you're going to do something that's affectionate, and you're going to say to them in the most, no buts, no qualifications, no nothing. This is my fault. This is my fault. Dad messed up. I sinned against you. I'm telling you, that is so much more important than being at a baseball practice. It's important to be at baseball practices. But I am saying absolutely it's more important than being at baseball practice. Ephesians 4:32, like you can look any of these up, but Ephesians 4:32 is this tremendous verse. They're all, like all verses in the Bible. But here's, like, the challenge is, hey, Paul says to the church at Ephesus, I want you to forgive the way God forgave you. That is, in the presence of repentance, God always, without holding anything back, allows us to be reconciled to Him. So, in any conflict in your home, be discerning. And somebody's going to need to be repentant or admissive at least, or, you know, I miscommunicated, this is a weakness in my life, and it requires somebody to repent very often and somebody to forgive. Any questions? Comments? I hope this was helpful. Like I said, when my wife and I first heard this, I can remember where we were sitting, and it was like, she used there were aha moments like, this is why I hurt you. Because I don't recognize that my impulsivity, for instance, is offensive to you sometimes. So I hope this is useful. And I hope you can take these and look at your kids and think of ways to appreciate them perhaps, or to understand them in ways that you couldn't prior to just thinking through some of this stuff. 10 minutes? See you in 10 minutes.